Okay, well, good evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Christine Thorpe, and I'm a board member of the YWCA of Northern New Jersey. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I wanted to acknowledge the board members of the YW who are here this evening. Thank you so much for being here tonight and for all that you do for the YW. I want to extend a special thank you as well to Sharon Elise, who I'll introduce momentarily, and all the panelists, as well as our CEO, Helen Arcantu, and our partner in this conversation, Heather Leclaire of the Junior League of Montclair, Newark. With that, I welcome you all to I'm Not Your Superwoman, Dismantling the Stigma Around Black Women's Mental Health, an evening of inspiration and exploration, which will be introduced and opened by Sharon Elise of Black Royalties. So a little background here on Sharon. In 2019, Sharon set a goal to start a tea company and realized that dream when she launched her organic herbal tea company, Black Royal Teas, offering an assortment of herbal teas blended to support feminine health and well-being. Her mission is to provide natural remedies related to reproductive and female health to support healing. She will now lead us in tea and meditation. Sharon?
Thank you so much, Dr. Thorpe, for introducing me. I appreciate you so much. Special thank you to the panelists and hosts. I'm just so excited to be in this space with you all. Much gratitude and thanks. As Dr. Thorpe said, I'm really, really passionate about reproductive health and feminine health and well-being. I feel like it's my mission in life to help women to live a more full and purposeful life. And I've set out to do that in my life through my tea company in multiple ways. And so I'm going to lead a meditation to open our mind and center our hearts, because I noticed that especially these times we're living in, through the pandemic, just daily life and things happening, we don't really find ourselves in a space of stillness. So we're constantly in motion. So part of being healthy is finding that quiet stillness in our minds and in our center so that we can clear our thoughts, so that we have more clarity, more discernment, and more peace as we continue to move forward. And so I'm going to play this meditation music and I'm going to guide you through this meditation. I invite you to close your eyes if you feel comfortable, placing your feet on the floor if you're sitting in a chair. If you're sitting Indian style, that's fine, whatever way feels most comfortable for you. But to just find yourself in a centered space where your mind can be clear and your heart can be open.
I was just going to say that make sure that you're sharing computer sound.
Oh, it's not playing for you guys? No?
You're muted.
Again? Okay, can you guys hear me now? Can you hear the music? Okay, awesome. Okay. So what I was saying was, if you feel called to close your eyes, that feels comfortable. I think closing your eyes is better because you're not distracted by anything in your environment. Bring your awareness to your breath, breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. Letting go of any anxieties, any worries, anything that There may be thoughts that come in, things that you're worrying about, things that you feel like you may need to do. Calming that monkey mind by again focusing on the breath, breathing in through your nose and letting it all out through your mouth. I invite you to envision a white light in your third eye chakra here. If you're unfamiliar, just envision a white light shining through, covering you, engulfing you, giving you peace, giving you light, giving you love. Again, breathing in through your nose and releasing through your mouth. I'm going to be silent for the remainder of this meditation, just to create space for you to focus on your breath, to really set an intention of stillness, of quiet. And anytime that you feel your thoughts roaming, coming back, just invite your attention back to the breath. Slowly begin to bring your awareness back into your body. Breathing in deeply through your nose and releasing out through your mouth. Whenever you feel ready, I invite you to flutter your eyes open, bringing full awareness back into your body. And releasing. Thank you all so much for joining me into this meditation. If meditation is already not a part of your daily practice, I invite you to follow me on Instagram. That's probably the best place to connect with me presently. I'm working on rebuilding my website. My Instagram is my name, Sharon Elise, and the number 12. And also, YouTube is a great resource for meditation, to be introduced to meditation. And I pray that your mind is clear and that your heart is open to receive the word and the discussion from the panelists today.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for bringing us to center in preparation for this evening. That was great. And I know it helped me to fully be present in the moment. I'm sure it helped others on the call. So at this time, I would like to introduce Heather Leclaire, our president of the Montclair Newark Junior League. Heather.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Thrope and the Y for having me here this evening and for hosting this wonderful event. The Junior League of Montclair Newark and myself are honored to be here among this esteemed panel and to have all of you who are participating this evening. This is such a wonderful and important topic that we are sharing on tonight, and the Junior League of Montclair Newark is thrilled to be a part of it. Just to give a little bit of history about the Junior League of Montclair Newark, we are starting our 101st year in the community. The Junior League of Montclair Newark is an all-women philanthropic organization that primarily serves the area in Essex County. So we are in Montclair and Newark, but we serve all of, more or less all of Essex County. And it is a training area for women to learn how to become volunteers, as well as serving many of the people in Essex County, especially youth who are within and aging out of foster care in Essex County. We've had a lot of wonderful experiences over the last 101 years, being involved in many important areas of community service and growth. And we feel that this is a great opportunity to train, learn, and continue to be advocates in allies in areas that are most important, and to bring important messages to the community. So again, thank you for having us, and we're really excited to be a part of this.
Thank you so much, Heather. Glad that you've joined forces with the YW, and as a member of both organizations, it's really a pleasure and an honor to sit in this space to enjoy this evening together and learn together. So at this time, I would like to welcome our YWCA CEO, Helen Arcantu.
Thank you, Dr. Thorpe. I just would like to thank you for all you did to pull together this wonderful evening. And of course, thank you to the Junior League of Montclair, Newark for working with us, and to this amazing panel. I'm just so grateful that you could make the time, and eagerly going to quickly say comments so that we can get to you, because you're what we really need to hear tonight. Again, good evening. I'm Helen Arcantu. I'm the CEO of the YWCA of Northern New Jersey. So happy that you could all join us, all of the participants this evening. We know that all of us experience temporary periods of sadness at times, and worry and nervousness, but sometimes those feelings just don't go away. And too often, and especially for Black women, we try to muscle our way through depression and anxiety, and try to go it on our own. Often, we prefer to use our own coping strategies when we're faced with these challenges. And, sometimes in certain circles, we feel that getting help could be perceived in a negative way or have some kind of stigma attached to it. These beliefs can have a potential effect on how Black women might respond to their symptoms. And that's what we're here to learn about. And, obviously I am a white woman. I am not a Black woman, but I am here to support my Black sisters and learn so that I can be a resource for them. I do understand that their stress and their mental health experiences are different than mine, and I want to be able to be supportive. So I'm very grateful to be here and to learn and listen from all of you tonight. And so with that, please, I just again want to thank Dr. Thorpe, thank all of the panelists, thank our partner agency, and most importantly, I'm really grateful for all the participants who made the time in your day for yourself to be here and take this in, because that's actually one of the hardest things for us all to do very often, is just to make that space.
Thank you so much, Helen. So at this time, I'd like to quickly introduce our panelists. You've received their bios in advance, but I'll give you a little overview of who will be speaking this evening. We have Dr. Yolanda Hawkins-Rogers, who's an experienced licensed psychologist with a private practice in Hackensack, New Jersey, and certified clinical supervisor for both permit holders seeking to become a licensed psychologist or a licensed professional counselor. Thank you, Dr. Rogers. We have Lynette Sheard. She's a community education coordinator and director of the New Jersey Mental Health Players, which is an interactive community education program whose mission is to increase awareness, decrease stigma, and break the silence around mental health. Good to have you, Lynette. We have Ashley Wisdom, who is a public health professional and co-founder and CEO of Health in Her Hue, a digital platform that connects Black women and women of color to culturally aligned and competent healthcare providers, health content, and community to improve health outcomes for Black women. Thanks for joining us, Ashley. And we have Taylor Bryan Turner, who is the Assistant Regional Administrator for the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, where she serves as part of their leadership team and works to advance their mission in the 6 New England states. In this role, she develops and supports and leads collaborative initiatives and supports other federal agencies to assure behavioral health is a priority through the nation. Thank you so much, Taylor. So We're going to go
Oh,
ahead and
can I
Oh.
take a moment to introduce you, Dr. Thorpe, and give a background on you since you were so
Oh,
kind
okay.
to introduce
No,
everybody else?
That's fine.
I'll just very quickly say, because it's important to note that Dr. Thorpe is the Dean of the Nathan Weiss Graduate College at Kane University, where her focus is on women's health, health disparities, holistic nutrition and health literacy. She is also the author of The Family That Eats Together, a nutritional guide for healthy living and living beyond the facade, which explores the health practices and retirement planning decisions of Americans of African descent. Christine is the founder and co-director of Stronger Together Wellness, a nonprofit that aims to inspire multicultural women across the lifespan to engage in healthy lifestyles and end health disparities in our communities. She is a certified wellness coach and health education specialist, as well as a member of the Delta Sigma Theta sorority and Mocha Moms. Before I hand it back over to her, I just want to also say that we will be having time for Q&A with these amazing panelists you just heard all about. You can please put your questions in the chat box and we will be responding to them at a later point in the program. And now I turn it back over to Dr. Thorpe and this amazing panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. We have some questions to ask our panelists and a lot of great information to gather from each and every one of them. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll start in the order of how I introduced you, starting with Dr. Rogers, moving on to next year, go on to Ashley, then we'll go on to Taylor. We have seen increased attention on addressing mental health needs since the start of the pandemic, then with George Floyd's murder, and most recently through the lives of athletes Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka. What do you find yourself continuing to dispel around Black women's mental health today, despite the increased attention? And do you find the challenge to be more internally among Black women or externally among the societal expectations to perform at heightened levels at work or home? Dr. Rogers?
That's such a loaded question. However,
it's a loaded question, but it's you get to tackle it first. Go ahead.
Thank you, I think. To be able to think about dispelling some notions that exist has to be put into a context of what our history is in this country. So my answers deal more with how do we understand the Black woman in terms of our history of enslavement and the issue of not talking about the psychological impact and the transgenerational impact of slavery on men and women in the community. So we can't think of the women without thinking about its impact on the women and therefore the children and the men. So I'm more of a macro person to think about how we have to think about it. So dispelling the notion that women are super women who can do everything is rooted in these ideas and perceptions about the African-American woman that started in slavery and is still sort of enslaved thinking with the larger community externally and internally in terms of the notion that women had to take care despite what, and that was the legacy of slavery, that women were given a little bit more aegis and being able to sustain and survive the family. So the idea that women are very strong and can manage everything comes from those roots. So in my therapy and in my practice, I try to bring the historical context of how we got to this idea of the superwoman. So dispelling that notion is to know our history. And so that's really important. Externally, I think all of us need to know a little bit more about our American history. And I've made some references to history about post-traumatic slave syndrome, Joy DeGruy, talking about Howard Zinn. He talks about the history of the United States told from the point of view of all the disenfranchised groups, that we have to look at our history to be able to change it. We can't just deal with this problem in isolation without thinking about having a macro effect on change. So that's external. Internally, allowing women to have time for self-care, which is what we've been talking about, and being okay with it.
That is true. That is true. Being okay with it, which was why we started this this webinar with that meditation to normalize being in a space where we can be okay with it. Thank you. Thank you for that.
I could
Miss
go.
Lynette?
I think
Miss Lynette.
Okay, thank you. You know, there's so much that, you know, what, as far as the increased attention, that we should be used to it. You know, that this is normal, that we should be available emotionally at all times, despite the challenges, the struggles, the successes, and that there's only extremes as far as the Black woman is concerned, as far as depicted, you know, through social media, through literature. I guess contemporary, more exposed literature is either the angry Black woman or the passive, selfless, subservient caretaker. And to try to find whatever that space is, you know, to dispel that our challenges are real and that we are really dealing with generational trauma, almost emotional defaults to I know I can speak for me personally, is I'm in therapy, and I've been in therapy for many years at the insistence of my boyfriend. You know, and didn't really see myself in certain types of relationships because I didn't know who I was and who I was expected to be. Because I grew up with, well, you have to be 3 times this, 3 times that, 3 times smarter, 3 times faster, 3 times, you have to excel in everything that you do. And there was really no downtime. And that, you know, how dare you be tired when your ancestors survived slavery? How could you give up the fight? You don't have the luxury to give up the fight. We have to continue this until it is finished. And so the societal expectations are one thing, and the generational expectations are another thing, as the doctor alluded to, as far as post-traumatic slave syndrome. Those things are real, and that's some repressed trauma that I'm even working through in my own therapy. But for me specifically, it is internal. I work in mental health. I understand it mentally. I get it. I read all the Samsha models, the 8 dimensions of wellness, I read all these things, but I'm the hardest on myself. That I am aware through therapy that I need to get to the root and to uproot these things so that I understand what my emotional defaults are and what I have subconsciously internalized, and to give myself grace and to expect others to give me grace as I express myself emotionally, that I don't talk about myself as this doer. I'm sad. This makes me angry. You hurt my feelings. And modeling that behavior with my 3 daughters and my grandchildren, like, I don't feel like it. I'm not feeling my normal self right now. And this is what I need to do to get well. Let me explain this to you. And how that shows up in my family is, okay, she's prickly. So whatever you need to ask her in 3 words or less. Don't give a long Shakespeare soliloquy about why, just get to the point. But I know my limits, and I personally seek therapy, have been in therapy for many years to deal with my trauma and living in a heightened state of hypervigilance. And it takes its toll. And not just the hypervigilance of just living in this world full of racism, but holding a high watch for my family too, 24/7. So it's giving myself permission to take it down, seek therapy, meditate if I need to, but be okay with saying I'm not well right now. But I will be, but just give me a moment.
Powerful. That is so true. It's so confirming on so many levels that I'm sure it's resonating with a lot of women on this call. Thank you so much for that, Lynette. Ashley, let's take it from your perspective.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me here, everyone. And I'm so glad that Dr. Hawkins Rogers anchored us in the history of like slavery and, you know, the trauma that we carry in our bodies as Black women, just from a historical context. The work that I do and how I often come to these conversations around mental health for Black women is centered in our lived experiences, because so often our pain, our trauma, the things that we're dealing with are discounted and dismissed. We see that within, across headlines about Black women's pain being dismissed. And that's also seen within, when it comes to our mental health, we're not able to express our emotions freely because we're either labeled as angry Black women. If we're too quiet, we're being standoffish. And as a working professional Black woman, I've seen how the work setting has played a role in, stirring up stress in my own life and anxiety. And the work that I'm doing is also trying to draw connections between how these lived experiences and these encounters with microaggressions and racism, how they also take a toll not only on our mental health, but our physical health if we don't keep them in check. So in my experience, I was working in a toxic work environment and found myself breaking out in hives. Once I left the job, the hive stopped. And so we live in this very capitalistic society. As Black women, we are constantly told that we have to work twice as hard, to catch up with our peers. And so there's this constant need to prove ourselves. And that takes a toll on our health and our mental health over time. And so the work that I'm doing with Health in Our Hue is constantly trying to draw the connections between how our lived experiences are taking a toll and playing a role in how how things are manifesting as it relates to our mental health and physical health. The other thing I would want to call out is this idea when we think about the question you posed around some of the internal things that we need to dispel, is this idea of just self-care being the end all be all. There's this article that Dr. Melissa Harris Perry wrote that talks about or makes the case for squad care and the importance of community and health. And that, yes, self-care is amazing, that we need to take time to take care of ourselves, but there's so much power, so much value that we can glean when we are able to lean on each other. I know that I get a lot of support when I lean on my girlfriends and I go to brunch or I send a message in a group chat to vent. There's so much power in community. And I think that if we stop leaning too much on having to depend on ourselves to take care of ourselves, that we would also see improved mental health for ourselves as Black women.
Yes, the importance of community. Yes, yes. And I think that when we lean on the right community members who understand and value what we value, that's really key. Thank you for that, Ashley. Taylor.
Thank you. Well, I'm honored that I get to go behind these brilliant women, and I will just try to wrap everything up in a bow. The fact that we are seeing champions in Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka says so much. Our pain, our trauma are often discounted and dismissed. And Naomi Osaka and Simone Biles are those safe spaces. They end the stigma for us. They allow us the space to talk about how we're really feeling, which is this Superwoman syndrome that we often have to carry. We know from a SAMHSA's point of view that 5.2 million African American adults have a mental illness, and 1.2 million have a serious mental illness, right? Just some numbers. We have a survey that goes out, a national survey on drug use and health. When I say that too, I wonder, why do we have drug use in the same data points as health, right? Something else that we could look at, the way we couple things, the way we use our language. But we know that out of 950,000 adults who respond to that survey, a lot of them have co-occurring disorders. Among the youth, 12 to 17 years old, 367,000 reported having a really bad depressive episode, right? And so we see our leaders and our champions on the screen having it out in real life, real time on social media for us to see. And so I'm so happy that Dr. Hawkins Rogers pointed a light at traumatic slave syndrome as well. Dr. DeGray is just a champion for us. As we see these numbers and we have the data from the pandemic showing that Black and Brown people are dying and hurting at a faster rate, we don't see increase in education. I don't see an increase in curriculum about this in schools. We teach sex education, but we don't talk about kindness, compassion, empathy, self-care, exploration, why our parents are lashing out at each other. Why am I not getting along with my sister right now? Am I stressed? And how that manifests in the family. We don't talk about why your parents might be stressing over a lost job and how that may come into the home. So anything that perpetuates a stereotype that we're not doing well, we shy away from, because we know that to society, you know, Black and brown people already have problems, right? We already have things that we have to deal with. So if we elevate that, we might never get the light that we deserve. So I like to say that we are love, we are light, we are leaders. And we need to really talk about this to increase our workforce so that we can build that community that you talked about, and not when it's too late. Don't think about a career in mental health after you've already gotten to college or you have that lived experience like I do. My family is a victim of a mass gun violence, right? And it happened when I was 15 years old. So that go, have to go to school, have to do your best. My mom still has to work 3 jobs. My grandmother still has, you know, did it. My great grandmother did it. I have to do it too, right? Because we can, and we do. And so I really appreciate the fact that just because we're talking about these issues now and elevating them, we are destigmatizing it. So let's keep on talking about it and being there for each other.
Thank you so much, Taylor. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We really do need to talk more about this. And I'm believing that this conversation will go on beyond tonight. Helen, I'll toss it to you.
Okay. So another question for the panel. Obviously, we're living in the, still in a pandemic, and some of the challenges that come with all of that. What takeaways do each of you have from this time, of the pandemic? And also, when we think about ensuring that all communities, especially non-white communities, have access to medical care and mental health care that they need, how can we ensure that from your points of view? And I guess we can go in the same order as Dr. Thorpe laid out earlier.
I think one of it, which I'm very happy about, is there's been a plethora of discussions and groups that have sprung up, like Miss Wisdom and Miss Elise, who's addressing health in an earlier point of their lives than ever happened for me. So I'm extremely happy, and that's a good sign that people are reaching out. What can we do to encourage these groups, to support them, to get them to a point where they are able to establish their financial existence on a permanent basis, so that it's not a temporary fix, because this is a long-term enduring issue in terms of what we need to do. I think we all learned that we can do with less during the pandemic. I threw away a lot of shoes and a lot of t-shirts because I was down to my yoga pants, and all I have to do is dress from the top up. You don't know what I have on from the bottom, but it was releasing to be able to be free. No more bras. I went back to the 60s, no more bras, who cares? But so I think it's releasing, that women have felt some release in terms of that, taking control. One of the things we talked about, Helen, in one of the sessions I met with you, we talked about how women are redefining how they're going to work. Be able to have, as Lynette said, some place to do self-care. And self-care isn't getting your nails done, getting your hair done. It's not selfish. It is breathing in, relaxing, and being okay with it. And it's not indulgent to have self-care. And I think people realize you could slow down a little bit. I think the other thing that's actionable is to pay attention to the research. There was a study I read, and this is about 2 years ago, that women across the diaspora, particularly the Caribbean, who had babies in the Caribbean, were healthy and strong. Babies were born, there weren't many issues. Within a year of women coming to America and having babies, we saw them have the same high mortality rates, infant mortality rates, as African-American women. So what does that say? Because the study listed it, but it didn't come up with any solution. So that speaks to the idea of how we must address this issue of what happens to women. can we go back to our small communities where we had doulas and we had women who helped other women, particularly women who have chosen to be single parents. It's not an anathema to be a single parent, but you need communities and communities of mental health as well as physical health to help parents survive and take care of themselves to be able to take care of their children. There's a saying, when mama's not happy, no one's happy. And if mama's not healthy, how can she tend to the health of her children and her community as a whole? So I think it's very important that we take more action to see that these things happen. Any organizations that's dealing with it, like all of you ladies here, doing something to reach out to women. I've dealt with a lot of women who were in a lot of pain, and I've dealt with them through DCP&P. And one of the pleasures of working with DCP&P is that I get to have some input about diagnosis and treatment for women who are perceived to be histrionic, which we no longer talk about personality disorders, but it sort of excluded them from the kinds of treatment they need. To talk to another woman with respect and dignity is important, no matter what their circumstances are. And in our African American community, as we are moving up, we have to pull up others behind us and be supportive, because a lot of women have experienced trauma. We know that's what's happening now. More and more women have had traumas that they enter therapy at the point that their children have reached the age that they experience trauma. And so we have to address that, because that comes out in the workplace, in relationships, in interactions on all levels. So let's support those community efforts by young people, particularly, who are next generation of leaders and mothers, to see that they get the support that they need. Let's build generational wealth, not just temporary support. That is, I think that is the actionable plan in my mind. I think I kind of covered everything I wanted to say. It's very important that we look at statistics and we look at the research. There's lots of work being done by Black scholars about what's happening, and we have to be conversant and share that information with others so that we can think about what kinds of plans we want to put into place. But we have a lot going on right here. So Ashley should get funded, and Sharon and Lee should get funded, and I'd like to get funded, but if I don't, I'm still going to do it. And we need to have more conversation among us.
Wow. Wow. This, you know what, just being here is just, is healing. You know, talking about, you know, coming together in community. And something that I say to my daughters a lot, self-care is not vanity, it's sanity. And as much as self-care is important, that understanding and having that sense of community amongst each other is so important. And I know that there's this move towards, as far as, first of all, to answer the question, non-white communities, as far as, first of all, it's important to acknowledge racism. For real. It's real. The hood is on purpose. It's systemic. And that systemic part, we don't hear enough of that. We hear racism and it's misinterpreted as prejudice. And so it takes it to a softer level, but it's systemic. And so we talk about inroads into our community, is that the systems need to be changed, not by allies, so to speak, but this language keeps evolving. Is now the language is accomplices. It's people who are willing to get into the fight, not just acknowledge, but to dismantle the systems. So what can we do, or what can especially non-white communities do? First of all, the acknowledgement of the system is so important, because systemic change is something to be acknowledged, because when you acknowledge that it is a system and you understand the origins of why people of color don't trust systems, it begins that conversation. Because if you understand, okay, this is why maybe BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color don't trust systems, or this health system, or mental health, or this or that, or any type of thing that's a government thing, because of historical trauma, based upon reality and based upon systems intended to kill them, disrupt them, and separate them. So what can communities do? First of all, acknowledge it, but also to develop an emotional connection and a trust based upon action and empathy and concern and intentional outreach that's for real, not just for the moment, but for part of the movement, and have a vision in alignment with people of color to see what does this vision look like. But now I've seen it a lot lately with Black people aligning with agencies, maybe celebrities to get people to get, say, the vaccine in Haitian communities or this and that, just to try to make a connection or put a face that looks like mine, when we're trying to move towards some type of institutional type of thing. But that distrust is real. And as much as we can talk about the system and acknowledge it, there's still some healing that we have to do. And there's things called emotional emancipation circles that are developing across the country. And it's an opportunity for people of color to come together and acknowledge that racism is a risk factor. To have the systems acknowledge racism, that, especially in the mental health field, to find therapists who acknowledge that this is real, that there are some side effects to racism, long-lasting side effects that do and will continue to impact until the system is dismantled. So we're doing it piece by piece, but I think that the consciousness is really important. And I just want to just kind of, because this came up in my presentation today, and I just want to share it. It's a quote from Marcus Garvey, and it says, a people without knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. And that's for both of us, the duality of Black and white relationships, understanding those relationships, but also you at this time, this is Marcus Garvey, can only be destroyed by yourselves from within and not from without. You have reached the point where the victory is to be won from within, and you can only be lost from within. And so for me, that kind of spoke to the mental health piece and getting the mindset to move forward and knowing that it is a war, but we have to dismantle systems internally, even through the Mental Health Association. I need to understand, well, how do I go? Can I find a Black therapist within my own organization? Can I connect? Is it covered by my insurance? Or, so all these things but the acknowledgement of systemic racism, that's number one for me.
I'm happy to jump in. I'm so glad that, Lynette, you just said a whole word on systemic racism, so I don't have to do that work. My background is in public health, so talking about systemic racism and equity is like preaching gospel. But I'll build on what you said. There's a quote by Brittany Patnett. I'll paraphrase it, but the profound part of it, she says, you need two hands, one hand to build and one to battle. And the battling I see as like dismantling systems, and the building is rebuilding new systems that are equitable to replace these systems that currently are not equitable. And so that's literally the way that I approach the work that I'm doing. And I'm going to respond to this question through the bias of of technology, even though I want to also caveat and acknowledge that technology is not the panacea, because technology that's built and it does not center equity has the potential to perpetuate the inequities that currently exist. But I will share that there are solutions that are being built by Black, Indigenous people of color to address the mental health gaps for people of color. Before I even talk about what I'm building, I'll share that there are companies like Ayana Therapy that is serving the purpose of matching people of color to therapists of color. There's another company called Hurdle Health that also is building a network of culturally competent and culturally sensitive therapists. Liberate is an app, a meditation app that has Black meditators and talks about the things, it has meditations that are focused on issues that impact Black people. So meditations that will help you address the microaggressions that you're dealing with at work. Health Interview, the company that I'm building, we offer 3 core things: connections to providers through a provider directory where people can search for culturally sensitive providers. We have a content library that is has articles and video content that is being designed and built with Black clinicians for Black people and takes into account our lived experiences, because sometimes the education piece is just half the battle, like getting people to be aware of the issues that they may think that they're dealing with in isolation. And then the third component to our platform is community. And so we built out this care model called Care Squads, where it's a peer support group. And we saw that the highest demand on our platform was for mental health support. From Black women are begging for support with dealing with anxiety and depression. But they don't only want to see practitioners, they want to connect with other Black women so that they see that they are not the only one that's trying to manage anxiety and manage this job, or manage anxiety and dealing with being a new mom. And so we've created this peer support group that is, a live bi-weekly monthly sessions with other women led by a facilitator, and we bring in a therapist and a psychiatrist to also share their expertise with these women. And it's really showing the power of, yes, clinical experts, but also there's power in connecting with other women and sharing your lived experiences, so you don't feel like you're the only one dealing with this issue. And so to answer the question really around how can we make sure that these platforms, the ones that I just mentioned, Ayana, Liberate, Hurdle, Health Interview, are accessible, is really getting employers. Like, most of our healthcare is controlled by where we work, which is a whole problem in and of itself. But if large employers and health insurance companies are making sure that they are providing access to these solutions that are tailored to Black, Indigenous people of color, that can address some of the access gaps to care, and can also address some of the trust concerns that Lynette called out. If people are seeing providers who look like them, who come from their communities, they're more likely to engage and seek care from them. And so I think that that is a piece that needs to be talked about more, that we're not going to engage with a system where we don't see folks who look like us there. But there are solutions that are curating networks of providers that understand our lived experiences, understand our distrust with the system, and are really trying to meet people where they are.
Beautiful. Very well done. If I can jump in, Dr. Thorpe. Self-care is not vanity, it's sanity. I wrote that down. I can't wait to preach that. I think also what you were talking about, quite bluntly, Lynette, were vaccinations, right? Vaccinations, huge hesitancy in vaccinations. We have Tuskegee's study. We have Henrietta Lacks as our historians, who the legacies, the footsteps that we're following in. So we understand that pain. You talked about building communities, Ashley. I'm not sure if any of you know about the book Blue Zones. Talks about the longest living people on the planet. They are from Okinawa, Japan, and they form these moais, right? They form these communities from when they're young, and they grow up with the same community. There's social support groups that form in order to provide varying support, social, financial, health, spiritual interests. It means meeting for a common purpose. And so if these are the people who are living the longest, it would behoove us to not follow in their footsteps when possible. I'm so happy you mentioned that. But I am going to talk about telehealth, right? Because telehealth played a major role in ending that stigma that we're talking about. We don't want to be seen in the line, right? Or we don't want to be sitting in the lobby. Or I don't want my girlfriend's mom, or she saw me, and she's going to go back and tell, and they're going to talk about me at school, right? So I would say, in addition to shining the light on exacerbating the crisis on less wealthy populations, I would say telehealth has played a pivotal role in accessing healthcare. Patients who use telehealth services were able to speak more freely, not worry about transportation, not worry about those financial barriers, not worry about stigma, who's going to see you, etc. Standing in line for your methadone, for SAMHSA, that is very important to us. Or your medically assisted treatments if you have an opioid use disorder or a substance use disorder. SAMHSA enforced these flexibilities And we hope to see them continue post-pandemic because we know how life-saving telehealth has been. Our numbers went through the roof. They increased by the thousands as soon as telehealth became available. People in recovery were able to stay connected to their peer recovery support groups and networks through AA, organizations like Shatterproof and Faces and Voices of Recovery, etc. If you need these services, right now you can still call SAMHSA's hotline. I know that it is Suicide Prevention and Recovery Month, so I have to tell you that there are a lot of resources, virtual resources, still in play right now. We are releasing a mental health suicide prevention line with Vibrant Emotional Health out of New York, and releasing that line to circumvent law enforcement and criminalization if a person is suffering from a mental health attack or experience psychosis, right? We've lost many, many men because they are misunderstood. And so, and women. If you call 988 instead of 911, you will be connected to appropriate and local assistance to get the help that you need. I know that there was some talk about professional development, our community-based organizations, and I'm honored to sit with you right now. I think I will defer my resources to the next question. Thank you, Dr. Thorpe.
I've been taking notes. You have each shared so much. I've got 2 pages of notes. I feel like I went back to class, but I know that's a good thing because it means those who are on the call are really getting a lot of rich information, which leads into this next question that will definitely challenge each and every one of us. What can we each do to be actionable starting now, tomorrow, and going forward on a personal level, a social level, or through policies on the state or federal level to change the stigma around Black women's mental health? Dr. Rogers, we'll toss it to you first.
I kind of think we hit on some of it, but I think one of the things is to be involved with your legislators. Now, that's something that may be difficult for many people to wrap their heads around, but it starts with our school boards, the mental health issues that show up in school. How are our children being handled? How are parents being handled? How are we shaping reform and legislation? We have to start on a micro level to see the impact of how it grows in terms of city, regional, state, federal legislation. So that's something I think we need to be much more involved with to get over the sense of feeling hopeless about being able to make change. And so people usually begin where they thought they can make the most amount of impact. I think that's important. I think what I've been encouraged by this evening are all the groups that are working so that I can be in contact with all of you to see what we're doing and do something that has a collective impact. Because the African-American community is a collectivist culture by nature, meaning we have a village and we all help each other. And so we've been separated. And that's one of the things I tried to do with the Consortium of Mental Health and Educational Professionals of Color, NJ, was to bring together mental health professionals and educational professionals because it goes hand in hand. Almost everyone that I know there's an overlap between mental health and educational issues as well. So we need to be more involved with what is happening on that level to help our families. Our children aren't being impacted. So I think we need to be involved with our legislators and our local communities, like the Y. What are they doing? How can I be involved? What's happening with the Junior League? I know it exists, but am I really getting involved to see how it's going to help me and my family? It's not just an organization out there that I hear about helter skelter. So I think that's really important. We have enough organizations at this point, but we need to be involved to see some impact. What's happening with mental health and what's happening with SAMHSA, and I'm loving all the things that Ashley's doing, but we have some overlap here and we need to work together for the greater good. Our collective effort will have some impact on legislation. Our local politicians, we know that's where it is, and get elected to positions. Any of you interested in running for anything in terms of mental health? I'm asking because we need to be there. We have people in education and higher learning. I'm so proud of Dr. Thorpe. I knew her when she had this idea in her head before she started, and she made it come true because she believed in herself and she had a goal. So we need to support others as well, help people dream. That's what I think is actionable. On a social level, being involved and have some impact on policy. You can't be heard if you're in your room or you're talking to someone else who's only talking but not doing something actionable. So it only takes a call. How many called your local politicians or your school council about the mental health of the children there? What's happening? Where are children being placed? How does that impact the mother who has to leave her job that doesn't allow her to have time to deal with her child? How does that impact the overall mental health of the family? So we need to be present and let our people know what's available and support those organizations who are saying they want to support as well. So we have the help, but we have to reach out and say, look, we need you to come on board. And I think to your presentation, Lynette, this idea that we have institutional racism and get the support with accomplices who say, we know it's there, okay, but we're educating ourselves too, because up until, a quick example is up till last year, 2 years ago, I didn't realize the psychological impact of having schools named after Jefferson Davis or Robert E. Lee, or kids in the South going to school with treasonous soldiers who were being lauded. What impact did it have over years? And that's the impact we have to think about and make those changes and support those changes. There's no other country that has supported treasonous leaders like we have, and we just sort of submerged it as part of our American history. So I think it's actionable and learning what our history is. Being able to intelligently talk about our American history, all of it, all the ugly stuff as well as all the great
Good,
stuff.
bad, and everything in between.
Good, bad, and everything in between. So I think that's really important. That's actionable. You can pick up a book. I made a list of some books and I gave it to Amy that I think are important for all of us to read. Example, The Color of Law was a book written about the institutionalized governmental efforts to segregate America that had an impact on generational wealth. How does that impact psychologically when you think about it? So I know it's a little heady, but I think it's important if we know our history, we can, all of us are Americans. I'm proud to be an American. I found out 5th generation grandfather was one of 272 enslaved people sold from Maryland to Louisiana who helped build Georgetown. So I know my family is American. I'm taking pride in it, but I want the history to be known.
And it needs to be known, and we need to be heady about it. It's time we've got taken it to that next level. And we need to be a collective group in being able to pursue all this. You're absolutely right, Dr. Rogers. Miss Lynette.
Woo.
A lot of exhaling I'm hearing, yes.
Thank you so much. I'm so full. I'm so glad to be here. I think that just going to go back to as far as, this whole racial healing and the superpower. I think for me personally, that my wellness, as far as an actionable item, my wellness is my superpower. Lynette needs to stay well first. Lynette needs to put herself first and consistently and proactively, that me taking care of myself will train my village that it's okay. It's okay to be well. It's okay to feel safe. It's okay to pursue and to engage in different systems, to try them out, but to consider myself first. That is the biggest thing. That is the biggest actionable item that I can do. My wellness is my superpower. I think also, as far as just really quickly, is that we need a racial healing. all of us that, while institutional racism is intended to separate us, we need to build and create new accesses for connection, because as we're connecting today, we see how much we have in common. We see all the fruits that we all bring that we can all share. But to understand our own origins, to know our own racial identity, as you talked about, your history. Do I know all my history? Do we know our history? Relearn the history of racism. We all have to, even as Black people, we have to relearn the history of racism, catch ourselves in the flow, and encourage and to be brave enough to catch white people in the flow of racism and systems in that flow. How we can be that person if our white brothers and sisters come to us and want to be an accomplice, to have an answer and to begin that dialogue and to engage in collective racial healing, whatever that looks like. But for me, my emotional wellness is going to be my superpower, and that's going to be my focus, because I can't do anything outside until I get myself right.
Love how you reframed what
you.
the Superwoman is self-care, and your wellness is your superpower. I love that. I love, love, love that. Miss Ashley, tossing it to you.
So I'm going to echo what Lynette just shared. I, from a personal level, I'm going to I personally model taking care of myself. So as a Black woman, young Black woman, building a venture-backed company, there is a lot of pressure on me. But I had to, one of my investors is actually a Black woman, and she told me, like, no one's asking you to be a martyr on this journey, because if you're not good, if you're not well, the company will not succeed. And so every day I wake up, I remind myself, I do my meditations, I get on my Peloton, I take care of me first before I get to the work, because
Look at Taylor.
that's what I need to do. So that's what I'm doing from a personal standpoint. I'm taking care of myself and then taking care of the work after that. And from on another level, I'm building a health tech company. But my passion, my background is in policy. That's what I got my master's in healthcare policy. I'm not doing any policy work. I'm in this innovation space, but I don't believe in working in silos, because this problem of health disparities cannot be tackled just from one approach, and that's going to be the answer. And so we are partnering with the Black Women's Health Imperative, and really are doing our work to be better informed about what Black women want from healthcare, what they want from their mental health services, and are going to be partnering with the Black Women's Health Imperative to, educate the ecosystem on what Black women need from a service standpoint and also from a policy standpoint. Like, what are the policies that we need to change? What are the policies that we need to put in place to make sure that Black women's health is being prioritized? So those are some examples of ways that I am personally being actionable, and they're very doable. So, like, find an organization, find a mission that you, that really resonates with you, and partner with them, support that company. Even if it's just downloading their app, like there are very simple things that we can do from personal standpoint, just normalizing how we're personally taking care of ourselves, normalizing telling our friends and our family members when we're not well. And then from a, business or policy standpoint, find an organization that you can latch onto and support as they're trying to advance Black women's mental health.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Very good. Really, really good. Ms. Taylor, you're going to take it into the home stretch so we can go into Q&A.
So good. I am so
Yes.
excited and honored to be here with all of you. Thank you so much for all of that input. Dr. Hawkins-Rogers, I was speaking to you in the chat. I said, yes, I hear you. Healthcare workers and educators addressing and reducing trauma together in the schools. We are working on that right now. For me, personally, I will say, be the change you want to see, right? Be the safe space. And I know it's difficult for us to do that and be a superwoman and not be a superwoman, right? And have that title, but just be a safe space. Listen when your loved ones and your friends are speaking to you, and listen for what is not being said. That's what we learned during the pandemic. We learned that we need each other now more than ever. And so that's what I have to say personally. Professionally, I think diversity, equity, and inclusion, if I may be so bold, became pretty trendy, right? Now it's a hot topic item. We've been screaming it for 400 years. Now we have pandemic data that we can use to back up your organizations, back up your CBOs, back up your goals and your mission. So for me, when I started at SAMHSA at the beginning of March, right in the height of the pandemic, I left HUD after 21 years. I did not have one friend to say goodbye to. Started at SAMHSA at home at a desk by myself, right? You want to talk about isolation. That was very, very interesting. When I got to the office, our Black and Brown, our BIPOC communities would say, we need help. We're hurting, right? What can you do to help us? And so in the health professional field, I felt a responsibility to be a voice for our populations who have been unseen, unheard, underfunded for so long, right? And so in response to that, one of the ideas that I had was to have a forum and host BIPOC community-based organizations. And it's called the Diversity Inclusion Project Showcase. This effort is in direct response to local nonprofits who wish to gain access to SAMHSA block grants. Now, federal dollars, once we give that money to the state, we cannot tell the state how to spend that money, right? It's up to the state to spend that money. So what we can help you do as a convener is to assemble historically marginalized populations with invisible and viable entities to start cultivating those partnerships, those relationships. When the federal dollars come out to the states, usually they have to spend that money relatively quickly. And he said, I know Dr. Hawkins Rogers. She spends the money well. She's excellent. She keeps up with the papers, and we're going to give it to her. Oh, Ashley, she's excellent. We're going to give it to her. Never saw Dr. Thorpe. Don't know Dr. Thorpe. Don't know what she's working on. Don't know anything. So she will not be at the table. So this mission is to create a safe space to cultivate those strong partnerships for equitable and healthier communities. The goal is to provide diverse community-based organizations an opportunity to present their purpose, their population served, their community impact that they're already making every day, like each of you are, to regional behavioral health leaders to create those partnerships and funding potential. So the purpose is to match the people to the programs, right? The programs that list, the people are there, but something's missing. And so we have to serve as a convener to get you in front of the funders. It's a round robin style. CBOs talk 5 to 7 minutes in front of federal, state, and philanthropic partners that have these diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and initiatives, right? And they say, we have great work, and they want to do great work. And you want to be able to raise your hand and say, yes, I do that, and this is why you should fund me. So that is the impetus that I wrote this program on. I heard the community loud and clear, and I did feel a responsibility as I'm sitting here to make sure that these voices are being heard. And so the SAMHSA Office of Behavioral Health Equity joined us recently. We had one in Region 1, about 400 registrants came for that one. And then the National Office of Behavioral Health Equity joined us just last month in August. And we had some representation from Region 2, New York, New Jersey, Commune Life, DBGM, which is an LGBTQ organization that knocked my socks off with the work that they're doing in community. Project Safety Net, New York, and okay, I'm going to mess this up. Hauppauge, New York? Hauppauge, New York. Okay, excellent.
Long Island.
Okay, beautiful. And so with that and many other organizations that we work with and our federal entities that come to the table to listen to you, please take advantage of those opportunities. I'm having one for recovery-based organizations for Massachusetts and Connecticut on October 5th. If you would like to join us so you can see what a diversity inclusion project showcase looks like, we'd love to have you there. So that information will be shared with you shortly.
Yes, please share that, because that was going to be the next question. That was a very important piece that I was glad you spoke on. I thank you, each and every one of you, so much. I'm going to pause as we are at the past our hour, but we still want to give folks an opportunity to ask questions. If you have questions, please do write them in the chat box. We're trying to get through the questions and be able to answer them. There's a question here. Has anyone had any changes in their spiritual life after realizing you and your mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual wellness comes first? That God has created all of us with a specific purpose, which is not in perfection, but also in our imperfections, is where he can best use us. So what changes have you experienced in your life when you put wellness first?
Well, I'll just quickly say that I think we as a people are very spiritual. Maybe not all religious, but we're spiritual in the sense that we have a strong, I think most of the community would have a sense of a connection to God, a higher power, however you will. And I think that centers us, and I think that's been the strength of our community for 400 years, to know that something better is planned for us other than what we see in front of us. And that gives us strength. So it's helped me. I was already rooted in it, but I got stronger knowing that something greater was happening beyond me, and I had to do my part. I know now who I am. I'm strong in my conviction about who I am and what my ministry is in terms of service. That I know, I'm very clear. And that comes from eliminating things and then bringing things into myself. So I'm very spiritually centered. And I know from research that when people are prayed for, they tend to heal faster, even when they don't know they're being prayed for. So there's basically now the hard sciences, the social sciences have accepted the fact that prayer, which was this amorphous thing you couldn't really measure or quantify, we now know that prayer works. And so you have to be centered with that. And I think that's helped us as a people all along.
Thank you, Dr.
I answered
Rogers.
the question, but
What was that?
I said, I don't know if that answers the question, but
I think that's a good answer to the question. Anyone else want to chime in on that one?
I'll
Go
chime
ahead,
in on
Ms.
that
Lynette.
one. It's interesting because I have a very interesting, I guess, relationship with religion, and even as it relates to racism, that that I've church dated in a sense in order for me to find my own relationship with my higher power, because people got in the way, or institutional religious racism got in the way. You know, there's a lot of that in institutions, and a lot of that will bring that trauma into religious systems, into this control. We don't have control here, but we can control this. So, you know, being conscious of my own emotional wellness, but also understanding our history. And through the Mental Health Association, we have a program that's the longest program throughout the Mental Health Association, besides the mental health players, is PEWS, and which stands for Promoting Emotional Wellness and Spirituality. Because a lot of people of color, before they go to a therapist, will seek mental health support from their pastors or their preachers, or, you know, to their church, you know, if they're hurting. So the point of that organization is to train church people, faith-based leaders, lay leaders, to educate them on mental health concerns, so that while you're offering people, you know, spiritual support, consider that this person may need some professional mental health services. So we train these people through the Mental Health Association. But it is very important for me, I'm a singer. I'm a performer, and I sing at many churches over the weekends, like virtually. That's how I feed myself. I make my connection to God, and it has improved my mental health. It's actually one of those Samsha models, the 8 dimensions of wellness. Spirituality is one of those 8 dimensions, and it has served me so much when I almost disconnected from the church. I mean, I go to church, the church I go to, you all know me, but it's you know, I had to find my own relationship and not get so caught up in the stuff. You all know what I'm saying.
Can
know
I
what you're saying.
can I chime in?
Go right ahead.
what
Go
Lynette
ahead, Ms. Ashley. Go
sharing
ahead.
just resonates. So I'll share a bit personally that my first time seeking out mental health or services or therapy was to unpack church trauma. Like I grew up in the church, and as much as it was a safe community for me, there was a lot of hurt as people, and that was my first forte into seeking out mental health. And because I didn't want the people hurt to cause a rift between me and my spiritual relationship with God. And by doing that, I'm still on my journey to like reestablish my relationship with the church as an institution. But I'm glad that seeking therapy allowed me to still hold tightly to my spiritual life that has kept me throughout many tumultuous seasons. And so prioritizing your spiritual life and or prioritizing wellness can definitely have a significant impact on like your spiritual life and spiritual well-being. So I just wanted to offer that as well.
That's right. That's so true.
I think a lot of people now I see in my clinical practice, more people coming into therapy, men as well as women, who are no longer holding on to the stigma that if I have a really strong belief in God, I do not need therapy. I think that's been dispelled. So I know, Helen, you're talking about dispelling some notions. That is, I do not see this as the same means of practice or thought that was relevant even 15 or 10 years ago. People are realizing I need help, I'm willing to seek it, and it doesn't take away from my spirituality or my religious connections. And that to me has been very promising, that people are seeking help outside of their church affiliation.
That's good.
Yeah, and that is not a weakness.
It's
Right.
not a weak-
You may need a pill and a prayer.
need a pill and a prayer.
I like that,
Absolutely.
but it's so true. Miss Taylor, you wanted to say something.
You saw me.
I saw you.
I unclicked the button, but
I
from a
saw
federal
you.
perspective, I just want to say that when the pandemic first hit, we wrapped our arms around our faith leaders in the community, because who was helping the helpers, right? As body after body was showing up, they did not know what to do after a while. They are on the front lines for people with addiction challenges and are in recovery. They are on the front lines for families who are hurting. They are on the front lines for communities, and they are not getting paid. And so the federal government is looking at them and saying, what can we do to be helpful? How can we bring your voices and your needs to the table? And they're not asking. This is the work that they do, but we recognize the work that they're doing. And so making sure their voices are elevated.
Very important and very critical.
At that point too, I got my
Yes.
vaccine at a church, at a Black church. That was the only way I could get it. That was the only place that was offering it in my
Wow.
neighborhood.
I did too. That's how I got mine.
And it's an important resource in our communities. So, Taylor, you're saying it, we've got to align and work together. Very important. There is a question, is 988 national or New York only?
As far as I know, I think it's national, isn't it, Taylor?
Yes,
It's
it's a national. It's a national
Okay.
line. It's being launched on July 2022.
July of
And
2022.
we're working with Vibrant Emotional Health, also out of New York, who runs our national helpline. They back the national helpline, and they are launching 988 as well. So kudos to NYC.
Okay. There have been requests for everything that's in the chat copied, as well as the questions that were asked of all of you. So I'm sure the people behind the scenes are doing what they need to do to capture information, because I'm hands-free right now. So I'm gonna, before I just have to say my heart is full. I have absolutely positively loved the opportunity to talk with each and every one of you. This has been so impactful, so powerful. I believe it was for everyone on this webinar. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much for giving all of these important nuggets, things that I would want to post on Instagram as a post and put your names at the bottom kind of information. So if you see yourself floating around out there that way, I might have created something because I'm quoting you. You said some fabulous, fabulous pieces of information. But thank you all so much, deep from my heart, for doing this. And this is not the end. This is just one step in many steps to move forward with Helen, with Heather, and with all who are on, who understand that this is a collective effort. I toss it to Helen, who has some closing remarks.
Yes, and I just, want to echo Dr. Thorpe. Thank you all for so much. I've been taking notes, old school, myself with paper and pens as I'm here. Obviously, the YWCA is very committed to supporting Black women. And I personally like to focus on learning my space as being an accomplice, in this work as well. I've had a few conversations with Dr. Hawkins Rogers, on this topic before today. And this is definitely another place in this ongoing conversation. In my notes are many opportunities for programming and ways that we can create these circles, create opportunities. The healing, as Ashley said, that the healing is in community. And not just in self. And I thought that was so powerful for us from a programming perspective. Obviously, the YWCA and I personally use my privilege to talk about systemic racism at length and do our part to try to, to work to break it down. And we have so much work to do there, and with reparations, but there's a lot to be done. The YW is committed and taking notes in this conversation on how we can do that. So thank you to Miss Lynette, for that piece. And in terms of helping people dream, I have to say, that was a real, a place where I feel that the YW has an urgency, for us to be able to put our space there. And, to Miss Taylor, Brian Turner, the resources and the opportunity to connect people with funders and ways to take all of these wonderful nuggets, but make them bigger and have greater impact is of course what we need. So we stand with you. I'm very grateful to have been in all of your presence and always here to lift up these conversations and to figure out ways that the YWCA and our community can continue to support it. So thank everyone so much. I know we went a little bit long. I think it was a good investment of extra time in your day. So I appreciate anyone who could stay on. And for anyone who didn't, if you talk to them and for all the requests, we will package all of this up and get it out. I know there was stuff I couldn't get down, so I'll be watching again as well with others. So thank you all. Have a very safe evening. For women, let me just do 2 shout outs for a program. We do have free counseling support at the YWCA for any person who's been impacted by sexual violence. You can call 287-487-2227. We have a 24-hour hotline for counseling, both crisis and longer term counseling. So that is available. So please, if there is a need there. Also for any non-white women who are interested in starting a business or would like to continue to grow a business that they have, between now and October 25th, we have a program that we are partnering with the Eureka platform to be able to support the growth of your business. So please, we'll put these links here for you in the chat, and we'll also package them out. We encourage, folks to embrace those and stay connected to the YW on social media. We have a lot of programming, and more to come clearly after this evening's conversation. But we are here to support and just want to be a resource as well as we move forward. So thank you all. Sorry, my dog is barking like crazy in the background. But grateful. And everyone, I'd say get home safely, but hopefully most of you are home. But I see some of you, like Dr. Thorpe, I know are not home. And I see, I think Taylor too. So if you're not home and you have to get home safely. Take some time for yourself, take some time in community, and be well, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And good night, everyone.